broadcasting live today at the Rotman School of Management for the TD and Rotman Women at Work Symposium and Essay Competition. Sharon Caddy here with Kate Wheeler and Christine Bentley. And you know, the more that we are talking to the finalists from this competition, the more I'm thinking these essays should be required reading for the young women coming out and getting into the workforce. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, some of these stories, as we've talked before, as we've mentioned during the past almost hour, I don't know how they're going to pick.
I know.
I really don't know how they're going to pick, and I'm sure that the stories coming from our two guests sitting here today, Tara Mora and Jennifer Villebrun, will be equally compelling. So ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So where should we start? Why don't we start with you, Tara? Why don't you tell us where you're from and what your essay focused on?
I'm from Toronto, born and raised, and I've made my career here. And my essay focused on my journey through 18 years in the music industry, to becoming a mom and then transitioning to a new career at the CBC.
So what did you do in the music industry, and tell us about the transition?
I worked mainly in digital, so I was, I guess, at the forefront is the cliche term of the digital disruption. I was the first new media manager at Warner Music Canada, and so I founded that department, and then I left to work at a startup that married music and technology, and I worked there for about 10 years, which I really loved. But then I became a mom, and I had a really hard time imagining how I would balance the work I had been doing, which was more of a lifestyle than a job, with motherhood. And I made the decision to kind of retire from that first part of my career and transition to CBC, where I'm the executive producer for CBC Books.
So Tara, you say your first two ventures were more of a lifestyle. So tell our listeners what you mean by that.
Just that they weren't particularly tied to office hours in any way. Because they were culturally focused, you had to be really involved in terms of being out at shows all the time, listening to current music. Because there was also the relationship with digital, it was a lot about staying current with technology, which changed so rapidly for a while.
Still is.
It's still changing fairly rapidly, but when you look at the disruption to the music industry in particular with Napster initially, and then social media.
I haven't heard that for ages.
I know, but it was crazy times, and the business structures around it really eroded, and so it became a lot about hustle and entrepreneurship. And the people who worked the hardest actually made the most money for a while there.
So your transition came largely due to the lifestyle issue, but you were also a mom who was making this transition. How was it to make the transition when you still had your children to be the first consideration?
It was very terrifying. I was someone who had really defined myself by the work I was doing, and I didn't have any framework for being a working mom. And then to kind of give up the safety of an industry I was comfortable with and knew really well and had been successful in was absolutely terrifying.
But it's gone well, and how many children so far?
I have one, and I have a second one due. Oh, quite soon. Not any minute, but certainly any week.
So Jennifer, tell us your story.
Well, I guess I grew up in a small town in northern Alberta, and ended up coming to the University of Toronto and going to law school before moving back home. I'm a little bit different than the other ladies in the competition, is that I think I'm the only one with no children, so that's a bit of a distinction between myself and them, and I think a lot of my essay really focused on how I ended up in this point, because I was always someone who wanted to have a child and have a family. And because of, I think, maybe a lack of focus on that aspect of decision making, I tended to focus more on career decisions. I've ended up being 35 and not having a family, and that's really something I'm at a point where I'm changing what I'm doing in my career because I want to be able to pursue that.
And how difficult is it to make that choice at this advanced stage, obviously, because you've invested a number of years in bringing your career to where you are now?
In some ways it's really hard. This year is 10 years that I've been practicing law, so it's a really big change to say I'm going to leave a career that I've been doing for quite a while and start something new. But at the same time, it's also really exciting because you have the opportunity to look at all of the different options that are out there. And so one of the things I said in my essay is I find myself at the same life stage that I was at 17, where I really have all the opportunities of the world open to me, and it's just there for the choosing.
So Jennifer, if you were your 20-year-old self, would you do anything differently?
I think that I would have, and I think it's just a matter of I probably would have tried to be more conscious about what decisions I was making. When you're starting out in the university, you have a lot more opportunities, whereas once you get into an established career, things just kind of seem to roll along the way, and you go with it. And I think that's a big part of what I felt this essay competition allowed me to do, was really think about that idea that we have to think about our values and think about what types of lifestyles we want.
As the others who've come up so far have said, when it comes down to this, to writing the essay and then the judging, it's an opportunity to journal what you've been through and what you've experienced. And you're taking a look at your own life story, perhaps through fresh eyes. Did you discover anything new by participating?
Yes, well, I think you're exactly right. It was really like a journal, and for me, I kind of hit a crisis point in my career where I was working a lot more hours than I wanted to be, and I really focused on this one particular day where I'd been at work for 24 hours and was recognizing that I wasn't going to get to go home for a nap or a lunch break or anything till about 7 o'clock that night. So it really gave me a chance to reflect on how I ended up committing to that amount of work, and that idea that we really do need to be conscious of balancing our real lives with our work lives.
So Tara, did you find, or did either of you find, one of our earlier guests said it's a discussion that we're not having with young women, that the time is finite. There's only so many eggs that are going to come there, and you do have to think about it, but the women aren't having that conversation. Do you try in your workplace to talk to younger women coming up and saying, you should talk about this, it's not something to be scared about?
I don't think I would ever tell them not to be scared about it, because
really?
I think it is a really loaded decision. I just try to always be honest and to make sure they know that if they have questions, I won't give them the textbook answer of, well, you're entitled to take a year of maternity leave and I'll support you in that, which is true and lovely, but in my experience as a woman who took time off with a child, the business you leave continues without you. When you re-enter, it's at a different stage. Your colleagues have progressed, different things have happened, and I think it's important to be honest and to be emotionally prepared for the difference in your life, in the life of your colleagues. I think one thing people don't talk about very honestly is the impact on female friendships. When, let's say you've been best friends with someone for 15 years and then you go down the path of motherhood and they don't, and there's an impact to that. And when you're trying to balance work and motherhood and perhaps other concerns, aging parents, different things that come up, it's hard to carve out space in the same way you used to.
It's really amazing we all survive, actually. I think about it.
I think women are pretty amazing, just generally.
And Jennifer, how do you feel? Do you talk to young lawyers and tell them about the pitfalls?
I think that there's this idea out there that it's not okay to talk about these things,
Mm-hmm.
and that's certainly something I felt. I do have some close friends of mine who are at the same stage of life and practicing law, and they come up against the same issues that I have, but there really is that sense that it's not okay to discuss it, and really I think that that's the biggest problem, is that if we were able to discuss these issues, perhaps we would be able to support each other in overcoming them and finding out new ways to deal with them.
How important do you feel this essay competition is in awakening some conversations that need to be had among the young women that are coming into the business world?
I think it is really important. I think that there is a lack of discussion. We hear the buzzwords, the work-life balance, but what does that really mean, and how do you deal with that, and how do people in the real life situations actually implement solutions to work-life balance?
It seems to me that it's the world is still weighted so much in favor of men. Men don't have to have these discussions, do they? And yet we sort of sound bitter when we say that. Do you find that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
No, I would absolutely agree. I know in my career trajectory, there's been many instances where there's been remarks or comments that were not really okay comments, but you deal with them because you don't want it to impact your career.
Well, thank you so much, Tara and Jennifer, and good luck, and stay with us. This is What She Said on SiriusXM 167 Canada Talks.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.